Greetings, friends, fellow citizens, fellow patriots, and even non-citizens, and welcome to this week's edition of the We the People Convention News and Opinion Podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski, and I'm the host of this podcast. I'm also the president of the We the People Convention organization. And this podcast is brought to you by the generous donations of our members from all 50 states who've been supporting us for 15 years to help us in our mission to protect and defend our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. And we thank all of you who have donated over the years, and now even most recently, we've been getting some nice new donations. Thank you so much. We want to welcome any of you who are watching this podcast, that if you have the wherewithal to provide some financial support, just go to wethepeopleconvention.org and click on the donate link and give what you can. We'd greatly appreciate it. I want to welcome those of you who are new to this podcast. I've been talking in the most recent podcast that we've been putting ourselves out there on YouTube and on TikTok and on Instagram and on Facebook and places we haven't been before. And basically, we've doubled our audience in the last 30 days. And I want to welcome those of you who are joining us for the first time. What you're going to see here today is a weekly news summary program where we try to look at what's happening in the news, sort out the propaganda, or at least expose it, and then tie together what happened this week that affects your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. Okay? That's what we're trying to do, because if we believe in America as a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, we must act to govern ourselves, and we must act to protect our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. So during this show, I will point out things that you should do to protect your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. So we're going to provide a lot of information, but we're also going to provide direction so that you can act to help yourself and your family and your community and our nation. So it's been a pretty contentious week, and some things that happened right after last week's podcast. It was 4th of July. I hope you had a fantastic 4th of July. We did. And also, thank you to all of you who sent notes and cards and even checks for our Nan and my 40th anniversary and for my 70th birthday. That was really wonderful of you. I could not have had a better 70th birthday with family and friends. I couldn't have a better one. And I'm thankful to God to be alive. But I'm also very thankful to all of you for your love and support over these many years. Thank you to all of you. So let's get to the matter at hand. On Sunday, of 4th of July, Pam Bondi released a statement about Epstein, the Epstein files and videos and his death that just was really curious. So, memo on Epstein case from DOJ, EPA infuriates the right. And I think the word infuriates fits the bill. It just was wow. It just was wow. The Department of Justice and FBI concluded there is no evidence Jeffrey Epstein kept a client list, blackmailed powerful individuals, or was murdered, according to a memo sent out by Pam Bondi. The latest update has infuriated those on the right seeking new information about the Epstein case, particularly after a disappointing document drop in February from the DOJ that contained files already available to the public. It should be noted, however, that some are beginning to question the memo's authenticity. The new DOJ memo admits there are countless victims of Epstein on video, but no client list or evidence of rapists that can be charged. Oh, it claims Epstein wasn't using video as blackmail either. So Epstein wasn't trafficking those underage girls. There was trafficking those underage girls to nobody. Is Pam Bondi serious? The pushback on X was just unbelievable. According to the reported memo, DOJ and FBI say there will be no further disclosure of materials, and it should be not be appropriate or warranted, noting that much of it contains details about Epstein's victims, which would expose innocent people to allegations of wrongdoing. Though through this review, we found no basis to revisit the disclosure of these materials and will not permit the release of child pornography. So basically, she said, I have the client list here in February. And then as you'll see in the next video, she claims, well, I didn't say I had the client list, I had the file. Then they said they had thousands of videos from the, Pedo Island. And now they claim that they are just child pornography downloaded by Epstein for his own personal use. Okay. And then things just went from bad to worse during a cabinet meeting that Trump had, where I think President Trump made the biggest blunder I've ever seen him make. So watch this.
Your memo and release yesterday on Jeffrey Epstein, it left some lingering mysteries. One of the biggest ones is whether he ever worked for a American or foreign intelligence agency. The former Labor Secretary, who was Miami U.S. Attorney Alex Costa, he allegedly said that he did work for an intelligence agency. So could you resolve whether or not he did? And also, could you say why there was a minute missing from the jailhouse tape on the night of his death?
Yeah, sure. If
Could I just interrupt for 1 second? Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time, and do you feel like answering?
I don't mind answering.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein at a time like this, where we're having some of the greatest success and also tragedy with what happened in Texas. It just seems like a desecration, but you go ahead.
Sure. First, to back up on that, in February, I did an interview on Fox, and it's been getting a lot of attention because I said, I was asked a question about the client list, and my response was, it's sitting on my desk to be reviewed, meaning the file, along with the JFK, MLK files as well. That's what I meant by that.
Yeah. And I said on X, that was a BS answer by both Trump and by Bondi. Nobody's believing this, President Trump. And obviously, there's a cover-up. Something's going on that caused this. And I'm going to give you my opinion on that. There's lots of opinions on this. But a total misread of the MAGA base. Because this isn't just about Epstein and that creep. This is about who actually runs our government. And what you keep hiding from the American people that we want to know, right? So, I mean, from the standpoint of Pam Bondi, saying, we didn't have a list. How did they charge Jeffrey Epstein, right? They arrested him. When Trump was president, they arrested him and put him in prison. They had to go to a grand jury with evidence. Like, here's the videotapes. Here's the travel logs. Here's the flight logs from the aircraft that he flew these presidents and prime ministers and powerful, rich people from all over the world. And now there's no evidence? And then you're going to tell us there was no videos, but there were cameras in all the rooms on Epstein Island? I mean, it just doesn't add up. And then for President Trump to think he's going to bully the MAGA base by trying to intimidate the person that asked that question, yeah, to say the least, it didn't work. It didn't work. And I'm going to talk about Steve Bannon and others and how vociferously they're coming out. But within a day, this comes out. How do you answer to this?
An opinion. This is a fact. I have seen. Remember, I was accused falsely on the Epstein. And ultimately, I was completely cleared. The woman admitted that she may have mistook me for somebody else and withdrew all of her lawsuits. And so from day one, from the day I was accused, I said I want every document out because I knew every document would prove I was innocent. So let me tell you, I know for a fact documents are being suppressed. And they're being suppressed to protect individuals. I know the names of the individuals. I know why they're being suppressed. I know who's suppressing them. But I'm bound by confidentiality from a judge and cases, and I can't disclose what I know. But I hand to God, I know the names of people whose files are being suppressed in order to protect them, and that's wrong.
How's that for a definitive statement by a lawyer who was one of Epstein's lawyers and who himself was accused of being involved with, pedophilia, having sex with underage, girls primarily. And he says, I saw the list. I know the names. I know who they are. I know who's being protected. So, why this is happening is really because it's bigger than this guy. It is pretty clear that he was an agent of Mossad. He worked for the CIA. There's testimony online from victims of Epstein Island, girls that were trafficked who said, Epstein told me he worked for the CIA. Why would you court all these powerful people if you weren't going to be running a blackmail operation? It makes no sense, and we're not stupid. And so it's gotten even worse. This morning, we're doing this podcast on July 12th, Saturday, July 12th. There's rumors that Dan Bongino did not go to work on Friday at the DOJ or at the FBI, and that he's thinking about stepping down. And I had said to you in a previous podcast that if there was funny business going on, I don't think Dan Bongino is just going to go along, no matter what they do to him. I think he would step down. Well, now we're seeing that play out. And he had a big fight with Bondi in the White House, and Trump is backing Bondi, but basically it looks like Pam Bondi's going to have to be fired because she botched this. And this is like an unforced error. Listen, why did they have to come out with this when they did? You could have just said, oh, we're still investigating, or it's going to take longer, or whatever. But they come out with it. Why? Well, how about because Benjamin Netanyahu was going to be in Washington for 2 days? Did that have anything to do with it? I don't know. But it certainly has something to do with the people on this list are powerful. And Trump is trying to move an agenda. And if exposing those people would bring down the monarchy, for instance, of England, he maybe doesn't want to do that. But he should have squared up with us. He should have said, hey, there's national security implications of this, and I know you want to see the list, but now is not the time. We could handle that. But instead, he insults us like, you're still talking about it? Hell, we have to. Here's why. Listen to what Steve Bannon says. Steve Bannon said, we're going to lose. Steve Bannon warns withholding Epstein files will doom the GOP. Former White House advisor Steve Bannon warned on Friday that Republicans would suffer major losses if President Donald Trump's administration does not move to release documents related to deceased pedophile Jeffrey Epstein's crimes and associations. Access reported on Sunday that the two-page memo showed the Department of Justice and FBI found no evidence of Epstein kept a client list or was murdered. But the public doubts have continued. Bannon said in his war room that failure to release information would lead to the dissipation of 1/10 of Make America Great Again movement and significant losses to the Republican Party in the 2026 midterms and the 2028 presidential election. It's not about just a pedophile ring and all that. It's about who governs us, right? And that's why I'm not going to go away. For this to go away, you're going to lose 10% of the MAGA movement, Bannon said. If we lose 10% of the MAGA movement right now, we're going to lose 40 seats in 26, and we're going to lose this presidency. They don't even have to steal it. We're just going to give it to them because we did this. Bannon also demanded the publication of all the Epstein documents on Bannon's war room Thursday. He called on the DOJ to go to court and push for release of the documents, or for Trump to appoint a special counsel to manage the publication of these documents. And so what we're talking about is you got Maxwell, Epstein's woman friend that was recruiting the girls, who's in prison on like a 20-year sentence. Well, if there was no evidence and Jeffrey Epstein didn't do anything, what did she do? It just doesn't make sense unless you look deeper, okay? Unless you look deeper at things. And so I mentioned Netanyahu, and you guys may remember a couple weeks back, remember when Lindsey Graham and whatever his name is, the Vietnam, fake, the guy, the senator who claims he was in Vietnam and he wasn't, went to Ukraine and met with Zelensky in the middle of Trump trying to negotiate a settlement, a peace deal. And then the day after they left, Zelensky had the surprise drone attack in Russia that everyone was like, wow, this is awesome. And then they came back to the U.S. and the next day they were having Zelensky in to meet with senators about, the future support of Ukraine. And I said, Lindsey Graham should have been arrested. He violated the Logan Act. He's not allowed to negotiate our foreign policy. But then I said to you, I'm afraid that what Lindsey Graham is doing is that he is holding the big, beautiful bill hostage to get Trump to support Ukraine. So what's happened now? Oh, well, geez. Trump comes out and said, the big, beautiful bill passes. And within days, Trump comes out and says, Putin's feeding me a line of BS. And we're going to supply Patriot missiles to Ukraine. That's a big switch from Trump. Okay? Now he's going to do them through NATO, blah, blah, blah. Okay? But the bottom line is, all of a sudden, he's now pushing to support Ukraine against Russia in the war. And I'll talk later about that, where he's going to make a statement, on Russia on Monday. But then, what happens? President Trump endorses Lindsey Graham for Senate again. Lindsey Graham, who we all hate, who we all know is a deep state operative, President Trump has just endorsed him for Senate. How you folks in South Carolina feel about that? And Trump's now supporting Ukraine. Now, I'm not criticizing Trump for doing those things, because you know what? It's called the art of the deal. The big, beautiful bill had a price to pay. If he was going to get it, he had to give up some things. You know what one of the other things he might have had to give up? May have had to give up on the Epstein files. Okay? I told you guys last week, none of the Republicans would have voted for the big, beautiful bill if they weren't in a position where Trump could hurt them in the next election. But they extracted their pound of flesh. And don't think these things aren't related, that Netanyahu's in town, the big, beautiful bill passes, all of a sudden Trump's abandoning Russia and going towards Ukraine, Lindsey Graham gets endorsed, okay? I said to you last week, our government is broken. We celebrate our independence, but our government isn't the government our founders gave us. It's nothing like it. And as Steve Bannon says, we don't even know who the hell's running our country. Now, President Trump is trying to defeat those forces, but obviously in this situation, they got a big piece of what they needed, and that was to hide their illegal operations to blackmail congressmen, senators, business people, politicians around the globe. It's disturbing. We in the Tea Party movement, who are part of the MAGA movement, understand Steve Bannon's anger. This is fundamental. Who is running our country? And when are you going to stop lying to us? Now, I'm asking all of you to pray for Dan Bongino, for Kash Patel, for Pam Bondi, and for President Trump, because we're in a tough time. We don't want to lose Dan Bongino, but I'm sure glad that Dan Bongino is using his leverage to argue our case, right? To push for maybe Pam Bondi to get, removed. Because again, a lot of us were like, Pam Bondi, is she tough enough? And all of a sudden she's on Fox News all the time, but who's the Attorney General? And they're talking about Ron DeSantis replacing her. I don't know how I feel about that. And I do like the idea of special counsels. I think Trump's going to have to act in that direction. But pray that Dan Bongino stays. You got to believe the last thing Donald Trump wants is Dan Bongino to leave angry like Elon Musk did and then have his podcast again? How many people you think would be listening to that podcast? Holy cow. Okay? So I'm hoping today, as I'm doing this podcast with you, the president and Dan and his team are all getting together in cash, and they're figuring out a way through this. We got to stick together. You can't be throwing everybody under the bus, but that doesn't mean we can't be critical. That doesn't mean we can't express ourselves, even in opposition to President Trump. We elected President Trump. We have a say. You're allowed to say it, but don't be a jerk and don't get into personal attacks. Stick to the facts and pray, because they're having a tough weekend. And we're hoping that something good comes out of it. A special counsel, a restatement on the Epstein stuff. They'll give us something, whatever. But they sure botched that, and Pam Bondi was the head of it. So, just hang in there, okay? And we'll see what happens. The story that I want to go to next, it was just breaking on last week's podcast, and I meant to make a mention, and I didn't, just say pray for the people of Texas who lost those children in the floods and things like that. And so I want to give some attention to this, but I'm going to take a different track than I thought I was going to take because of feedback from you guys during the week. Texas floods latest, over 120 dead. It's now 129 as Trump and Melania tour devastation for once in a 200-year event. So President Trump and Melania went there to see the devastation, meet with the people. President's visit comes amid reports that Carroll County officials were repeatedly denied state funding for an emergency flood warning system. That's not necessarily true. The people of that county could have put it up. They wouldn't pay for it. They were looking for a grant. There's a lot of misinformation. Donald Trump visited Carroll County to survey the devastation left by flash floods that swept through the central Texas county. As Texas lawmakers face growing scrutiny over the state's flood warning system, President and First Lady Melania Trump are due to meet with top state officials, emergency responders, and other people. After seeing this horrible event, Trump said, "I would imagine you'd put alarms up in some forms," Trump told Meet the Press on Thursday ahead of the trip. This is a once in a 200-year deal. Okay. Well, the left tried to make hay, and the climate commies, anti-capitalist climate commies tried to make hay. And they said, there was no warning because Trump fired all the people in NOAA. Didn't fire anybody in NOAA. They were there. They were all there. That day, as soon as it happened last Sunday, NOAA put out, we said a warning at this time, a warning at this time, a warning at this time, a warning at this time. The phone warnings were going off. They did the job they're supposed to do. The fact of the matter is, no, they didn't have sirens, for these campers and things. And it happened so fast, there's a lot of people who don't think that would have mattered. Okay? It was a tragedy, and it's really sad. But then something came up that a lot of you have been about for a long time, okay? And that's cloud seeding and chemtrails. For those of you from Northeast Ohio watching this podcast, we had a guy at the top radio guy in Cleveland on 1100 WTAM, Mike Trevisano, who passed away a few years ago. He was adamant that the chemtrails, the trails from the airlines flying overhead, was the government spraying us with chemicals. He believed that, he advocated for it, and they called him every name in the book and just trashed him. But many of you have been on this for a long time, and you knew something was going on, but they would never admit it. Well, then this storm caused all kinds of things, and I'm going to start by playing this video because Will Cain on Fox on his 4 o'clock show actually went into this cloud sitting thing and interviewed the CEO of this cloud sitting company, Augustus Dorico, and watch this short interview here.
Question is whether or not Rainmaker, cloud seeding on July 2nd, contributed to storms that occurred on July 4th. Did it enhance? Did it intensify what we saw some 36 to 48 hours later?
Unequivocally, our cloud seeding operations on July 2nd did not impact the flooding that occurred later. And that said, my heart and prayers are still with all of the people of Texas and all the families that have been affected. It was a tragedy. But in cloud seeding on the 2nd, One, we are regulated by the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation, and we have what are called suspension criteria, where if there are National Weather Service flash flood warnings or severe storm warnings, then we cannot operate in those areas per the restrictions and regulations we have. Our meteorologists actually proactively suspended operations a day before the National Weather Service issued a flash flood warning. So we were ahead of the curve there. And then even so, the precipitation that we induced, right, like the very best operations can produce tens of millions of gallons of precipitation over hundreds of square miles. That is de minimis relative to the remnants of the tropical storm that came in and dumped trillions of gallons of precipitation.
So you were able to produce, in short, something like this much rain, less than a centimeter of rain, and the flood itself, the storms themselves, it filled up a 20-foot pond, an Olympic-sized pool, 20 inches of rain. And so your argument is, if anything, we contributed the tiniest bit. I want to end with one somewhat scientific but skeptical question that I think you're ready to answer. I've listened to hours and hours of your content and read about Rainmaker. And the question is the silver iodide that you put into the atmosphere localized to one cloud capable of remaining in the air? And as a new storm system moves in, supercharging that storm system. Could that have happened in Texas?
So supercharging, no, absolutely not. Remaining in the atmosphere, no, not that either. When you seed the clouds themselves, when you disperse the silver iodide into it, and then it precipitates, that aerosol, that particulate precipitates down and out within the course of hours. Now, if you were to just disperse aerosol into open air, then it could persist longer. But one, we were seeding clouds rather than dispersing it just in the open atmosphere. And two, any amount that would have remained in the ensuing days and hours from our operation would have been so radically diffuse that it have been lower in concentration than just the background dust.
So it either produces rain within an hour or two, or it dissipates within, I've heard you say something like 12 to 20 hours, meaning some 36 to 48 hours once the storm moves into Texas, your silver iodide would no longer be part of the equation?
No, not at all.
So again, do you want to believe this guy? I mean, they're obviously in the business of trying to get rain to fall for farmers. Okay. And believe it or not, the area that flooded had been in a terrible drought. There was no water at all. I mean, literally a week ago, it was a totally dry bed. And then I don't know if you saw the videos. This happened so fast, it's unbelievable to me. I mean, literally, and I posted a video on X. If you're not following us on X, it's TomZWTPC at x.com. Just go sign up for an account. Follow us. Just go to TomZWTPC at x.com and click the follow link, and then can even click the little alarm so it'll notify you to post it. I put a video out where they were filming this bridge, and they showed the beginning of this flood coming down the dry bed, and it was a nice wall of water, but it was like 2 feet tall. They were on a bridge that was like 34 foot high, and within an hour, the water was over the bridge. Wow. Okay? That's just amazing. But now we get into this cloud seeding thing, and I don't know if you remember, but RFK Jr. said that they were going to be investigating stuff because there were some things about cloud seeding in North Carolina, I think it was, and Florida. And then Nichole Shanahan, okay, Nichole Shanahan, who is the one that does the MAGA stuff, who was Kennedy's vice presidential candidate until he dropped out from the Democratic primary. She posted something on X, and I didn't even know you could post something this big. This is like a magazine article on X. I've never seen anything like this. So I've posted it on my X page, and I'll put it on our podcast page so you can click on it and read it if you like, even if you don't have an X account. But she put this thing that said, geoengineering, who's behind it and how we stop it. And this is like everything you ever wanted to know about geoengineering, which isn't just rainmaking. Over the past month, I've been in contact with a government whistleblower, an individual who has held high-level security clearances and has spent over a decade consulting directly with major federal agencies. Their experience spans the Department of Defense, Energy, NOAA, intelligence community, and others. With their permission, I've agreed to share here on X information they provided to me. While the whistleblower did not disclose any classified information, what they did provide was a roadmap to navigate the tangled mess that are in our government's geoengineering programs. They told me that despite President Trump's 2020 directive to halt taxpayer-funded climate change initiatives, federal grants for solar radiation management, stratospheric aerosol injection, and other geoengineering technologies are still being issued. The programs haven't stopped, they've just been renamed, just like what they're trying to do with DEI. But this article goes on to talk about things where people are trying to blot out the sun to change the climate. They're not just trying to create rain for farmers. This goes back and has evidence about how they tried to change the direction of hurricanes and things. And our congressmen fund this, and they don't even know what the heck's going on. You should not have the right. No one, Bill Gates, should not have the right to affect the climate of the world without us having a say. What do you think? So this is way overdue for some serious public disclosure. And then, bam, what happens here? Look at what the EPA had just said. This is amazing.
Concerned Americans have urgent and important questions about geoengineering and contrails. The American public deserves and expects honesty and transparency from their government when seeking answers. But for years, people who asked questions in good faith were dismissed, even vilified by the media and their own government. That era is over. The Trump EPA is committed to total transparency. As a result, I tasked my team at EPA to compile a list of everything we know about contrails and geoengineering for the purpose of releasing it to you now publicly. In other words, I want you to know everything I know about these topics and without any exception. Instead of simply dismissing these questions and concerns as baseless conspiracies, we're meeting them head on. We did the legwork, looked at the science, consulted agency experts, and pulled in relevant outside information to put these online resources together. Everything we know about contrails to solar geoengineering will be in there. That means anyone who reads through this information will know as much about these topics as I do as EPA administrator. To anyone who's ever looked up to the streaks in the sky and asked, what the heck is going on? Or seen headlines about private actors and even governments looking to blot out the sun in the name of stopping global warming? We've endeavored to answer all of your questions at the links on your screen. In fact, EPA shares many of the same concerns when it comes to potential threats to human health and the environment, especially from solar geoengineering activities. The enthusiasm for experiments that would pump pollutants into the high atmosphere has set off alarm bells here at the Trump EPA. Prior to now, EPA has never been this proactive to raise awareness about concerns with geoengineering and to stop this activity from being scaled up. This is what it looks like when government actually listens to the will of the people and doesn't try to squash it. You can always trust this administration and this EPA to take your concerns seriously, answer your questions honestly, and carry out the will of voters with integrity.
Wow. Think maybe Pam Bondi ought to watch that video? A little bit of a contrast between, hey, we're not going to just call them conspiracy theories. And again, this looks like another conspiracy theory that is true, right? So you can go to epa.gov/contrails and let's see what they got. The question is going to be, will that stuff be legit or will it be, propaganda? I imagine some of you who are really into this issue are going to be going to epa.gov/contrail and looking at everything and raising questions, because something is going on and nobody's been looking out for the American people and for our best interests. So maybe out of this disaster in Texas, something positive will happen for all of us. But wow, Pam Bondi, listen up. That's how you handle it. Not say, oh, Epstein killed himself. Here's the tape with a missing minute. And, oh, yeah, there's no list, even though you had to get a grand jury to put him in jail because you had to have some evidence. And, he had all these girls, but he didn't have anybody who's trafficking him. Come on. Stop it. Stop it. Don't insult our intelligence. Okay, so the next big story this week is basically the fact that the left, the communist left that's taken over the Democrat Party in the United States, is now just hiding all their pretense of, we're for the illegals because you're treating them illegally, you're not giving them due process, whatever. They're just going to war. They're about violence. Okay. And so I don't have to tell you that. They told us that. This story is at wethepeopleconvention.org this week. Democrat base threatens violence. This is from Democratic congressmen and senators, okay, saying that they're being told by their voters that they want violence. Democratic lawmakers have said that their voters are now threatening blood and violence over their inability to stop President Donald Trump from continuing forward with his agenda. Oh, I thought they believed in democracy. I thought they believed in votes counting. I thought they believed in, Donald Trump, you lost, just admit it. Yeah, guess not. Several House Democrats told Axios that members of their voting base have become increasingly agitated and hostile in the face of Trump's ongoing agenda, which reached a milestone last week with the passage of the Big Beautiful Bill. This idea that we're going to save every norm and that we're not going to play the Republicans' game, I don't think that's resonating with our voters anymore, said one House Democrat. Another House Democrat said they now feel a sense of fear and despair and anger among voters, and that this puts us in a different position where we can't keep following norms of decorum. Since when have you followed the norms of decorum? You mean when you brought in agitators to the Kavanaugh hearings and you conspired Cory Booker and Kamala Harris to disrupt them and make false accusations? When have you followed any norms of decorum, you liars? Okay. Over 24 Democrats anonymously confirmed that voters are threatening serious, potentially even violent consequences over Trump's continued agenda. One even said that voters have suggested that they, the Republican or the Democrat House and Senate members, should be willing to get shot when confronting IRS agents. Right? That's what they're saying. Our own base is telling us that what we're doing is not good enough. They need it to be there needs to be blood to grab the attention of the press and the public. They need another George Floyd, don't you know? And another said that civility isn't working and they need to prepare for violence to fight to protect our democracy. Huh? Right? Yeah. You mean the democracy that we all voted and you lost? Oh, no, you're just a bunch of damn liars. You're a bunch of propagandists. For those of you new to this show, that's what we point out. They're using words to lie to you, all right? It's real simple. They want to fight because they don't believe in democracy. They believe in communism, and they want to destroy our representative republic so that China can rule the world. Just, trust me, okay? Some Democrats strongly caution voters and other lawmakers from embracing these extreme views. What I've seen is the demand that we get ourselves arrested intentionally or allow ourselves to be victims of violence. And a lot of the times that's coming from economically very secure white people, the lawmakers said. Yeah, the people who funded Antifa. Yeah, the white billionaires. Just a matter of fact, there was just a thing that we talked last week about the phony, Muslim Marxist in New York, that everybody's making a big deal about. Yeah, all his money came from California. All his money came from Hollywood billionaires who love those Marxists because they're not going to have to live under them, right? So what's going on is the communist China understands that they want to destabilize the United States. And violence is a great way to do it. And so they're paying Democrats to instigate violence. And it's working as far as it's getting some people to do that, but it's not working like 2020 and George Floyd, when they had Donald Trump tied up, right, with Russia, and don't call out the National Guard as they burn Minneapolis down because that would be what dictators do. Yeah, Trump ain't buying that crap anymore, okay? And we ain't stopping. But ladies and gentlemen, this is the counter-revolution. We are the counter-revolutionists. Obama and the left and the Chinese instigated a revolution to try to take over our nation, and they came this close. But we, the patriots, particularly the January 6th political prisoner patriots, who would not give in after being tortured and starved and mistreated in the DC gulags, still would not betray Trump and our country and our movement. And we fought them and we beat them back last November. And now we're trying to take back what was taken from us. We're killing DEI. We're taking back our universities. We're getting out of USAID. We're going after the sanctuary cities. That's the heart of the anti-American communist overthrow of our nation. Look at the video of the marijuana farm this week, where ICE agents went to this marijuana farm to arrest illegals, of which 9 of them were undocumented minors, okay, who had no parents with them, to arrest them, and there was an altercation. And here you had helicopters and ICE agents in full military gear. It looked like something out of Vietnam, because we are at war. We're at war with the left, with the communists, with China, in our streets. And yeah, people may die because they're not going to stop. But we're not going to buy into their sob story. We're not going to buy into, Trump's a dictator and we should overthrow him. No. You and I are like, yeah, I want to see that. I want to see ICE arresting these people and throwing them out. So there was an incident in Texas that was a serious incident. Attempted murder charges against 10 who allegedly ambushed ICE agents in Texas. That's now up to 12 people have been charged with attempted murder. As many as 10 individuals have been charged with attempted murder for allegedly ambushing ICE agents outside a detention facility, an ICE facility in El Alvarado, Texas. Acting U.S. Attorney Nancy Larson discussed the charges in a press conference on Monday, calling it an egregious attack. This is an egregious attack on federal and local law enforcement officers, and it's part of an increasing trend of violence against them, said Larson, instigated by the Communist Democrat Party and their Chinese handlers. Larson said there was a 911 call from the facility. 2 unarmed corrections officers went outside to speak with the vandals. One of the gunmen signaled using a flashlight to the vandals. Then they opened up fire. Alvaro Police said that when one of the first responding officers tried to engage with the person that had spread spraying graffiti on the outside of the facility, an unknown number of suspects opened fire with weapons. At least 1 bullet struck an officer in the neck, police said. The injured officer was flown from the scene to a Fort Worth hospital, was treated and later released. 10 suspects have been charged with 3 counts of attempted murder of federal officers and 3 counts of discharging a firearm in relation to a crime of violence. They give their names here. I won't give them to you. But President Trump talked about the fact that these people had brand new weapons. They had, body armor that looked like it just came out of a military shop. And President Trump said, we're going to find out who's funding these people, because these are paid military assaults. Now, they're amateurish. You think you're going to defeat ICE? You're going to think you're going to defeat the U.S. military? Bring it on. Bring it on, you dumb clowns. Antifa. Yeah, it was no problem burning cities, beating up people, attacking police, injuring citizens, and even killing people when no one opposed you. Yeah, see how that works out when you're going to get arrested. And Kamala Harris ain't going to be able to bail you out in 24 hours. Yeah, we're at war, folks. It may not be totally visible to you. Understand, we are fighting with weapons against the left. And so then what do the Dems do? Oh, this is rich. This is rich. Trump blasts deranged Democrats over bill to identify ICE officers, prevent them from wearing coverings on their face, right? Because what wouldn't the Marxists do? When they cover their faces in every protest, they don't want ICE to be able to cover theirs, so they can dox them and attack their families. And the Democrats think that's a great idea. Washington, President Donald Trump blasted Senators Cory Booker and Alex Padilla on Wednesday over their bill, which would require Customs and Border Protection officers and Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers to display legible identification and prohibit them from wearing face coverings. Trump said, if you expose them, because of statements like have been made by the Democrats and others on the left, I think probably exclusively you put them in great danger, tremendous danger, including their family. Trump then highlighted that the Democrats do not take issue with protesters like those seen on college campuses regularly sporting more than just masks tied to their faces as they do with ICE and CBP officers. Trump said, it's sort of funny when people picket in front of Columbia, in front of Harvard, and they have masks on, more than masks. I mean, you can't see anything. Nobody complains about that. But when a patriot who works for ICE or Border Patrol puts a mask on so they won't recognize him and his family, so they can lead a little bit of a normal life after having worked so hard and so dangerously, they have a problem with that. I don't get it. I think I've mentioned to some of you who've been longtime viewers, I spoke in Nashville, Tennessee at a Tea Party event years ago, and there was Antifa there. And I walked over to them, and there were Tennessee State Patrol kind of on the other side of them, and the Antifa people were masked. And I turned to the officer and I said, officer, if that person was standing outside of a bank, would you walk up to them and say, I want to see your driver's license and take off the mask? He said, yeah. I said, well, why don't you do that right now? He said, I don't know. Every state needs to have a law that if you wear a mask at a protest, you are committing at least a misdemeanor because your intent is not to protest, but to do something illegal. Why else are they wearing masks? If you're not doing anything wrong, what are you afraid of? That's what they're saying about the ICE people, right? What about your people? This is what we're facing. They're playing little games. We got to crush them with a hammer. No mercy. No mercy. And that's what's great. I've talked to you in past podcasts. The things in LA and stuff where they arrested the people that, put on those events and things. Well, here's another story just to follow this up. Vice Chair of LaRaza, UNITA, arrested for tire spiking Border Patrol vehicles in California. And this is an important story because it ties in another important group. Border Patrol agents arrested 4 anti-ICE violent lunatics on Tuesday, hours after they allegedly used improvised tire spikes to attempt to disassemble federal law enforcement vehicles and obstruct immigration law enforcement operations in Van Nuys, California. One of the men arrested, Ernesto Alya, is the current vice chairman and former chair of Partido Nacional de LaRaza Unida, the political party better known as LaRaza, better known as the race. LaRaza has been in the United States for decades, basically saying that California belongs to Mexico and they're trying to overthrow the U.S. government. Okay? That's who's behind this. Agents have recovered unused improvised tire spike devices and a small backpack from the subjects. But the thing that was important was that what does that say on the bag, on the backpack where their information was? Well, it's an emergency bag with a handy checklist on the outside provided by Chirilla, Coalition for Humane Immigration Rights Los Angeles, in partnership with Listo, California, which is part of California Governor's Office of Emergency Management. Chirilla is the organization we reported about in June at the outset of the city's anti-ICE raids. They received more than $34 million of taxpayer money to put on these anti-American riots. They also had the Los Angeles Rapid Response Network, which has been doxing Border Patrol and ICE locations of vehicles, putting law enforcement officers at risk. Again, we are funding the communists trying to overthrow us. And Trump is clamping down and putting an end to it, okay? But That's the deal. These people don't exist if we take their bloody money. We got to keep pushing, and you got to support this. No matter what propaganda the lefty media puts out of, oh, look at this poor farmer, they deported the wrong person. No. You imported 12 million people to destabilize our nation, and we're going to deport all of them. And that is overwhelmingly supported by Americans, like 60-some% of, including Democrats, want to deport all of them. We ain't buying your sob stories. We're not buying it. Okay, so one last story before we break for the first half of the podcast, and this is a direct ask for all of you, a direct ask. I put this at wethepeopleconvention.org. Get back to work. Pass the $9.6 billion rescission bill and vote to approve all of Trump nominees. The U.S. Senate is only working 3 daggone days a week. They're working 3 days a week and they're off 4 days, and they want to take August off. Hell no. There's a direct ask. You go to wethepeopleconvention.org. If you don't know your senator's phone number, click on this story, and right at the beginning it says call to action. Patriots, call right to your senator's office today and tell them to get to work. A day after President Donald Trump assumed the Oval Office for the second time, Senate Majority Leader John Thune went to the Senate floor to pledge that he would do whatever it takes to confirm the returning president's executive appointments. As I have repeatedly said, Senate Republicans are ready to work as long as needed to confirm President Trump's nominees. Nights, weekends, recess, said the South Dakota Republican on an X post, including his remarks. As it turns out, that was a load of horse manure. It is now July, and there are currently more than 120 Trump nominees awaiting confirmation by the U.S. Senate. This exhaustive list, and you can click on this story and see the list. This exhaustive list includes pivotal appointments such as Matthew Lohmeyer to be Undersecretary of the Air Force and Joe Kent to be Director of the National Counterterrorism Center. As the Federalist Rachel Bovard previously observed, while cabinet secretaries are certainly important, everyone in Washington knows agencies, sub-cabinet level officers and below are just as critical to executing the president's agenda. Having seen how the entrenched bureaucracy worked to sabotage Trump in his first term, most Republican voters now understand how critical these appointees are. Okay? And as I've told you, in Trump's first term, in the whole 4 years, they only got 60% of the people that Trump is legally allowed to appoint to run his government in office. 60% over 4 years. And now the damn Senate is doing it again. Okay? And then Trump ain't fooling around like the big, beautiful bill. Trump threatens to withhold endorsements for GOP senators who don't back his rescission bill. Trump posted on Truth, it is very important that all Republicans adhere to my rescission bill, and in particular, defunding the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is worse than CNN and MSDNC put together. Any Republican that votes to allow this monstrosity to continue broadcasting will not have my support or endorsement. Okay? I'm asking you this week to contact your senators, 2 senators in every state, and demand they get to work, and they work, like he said, nights, weekends, round the clock, and confirm every Trump nominee. What, that's asking too much? How many days a week do you work? How many hours do you work? What would it be like if you could work 3 days a week? My goodness. And so what's the Democrat response? And you know we're over the target, but you got to question the daggone rhinos. When this happens, Democrats threaten government shutdown if the GOP passes the $9.4 billion rescission bill. Folks, $9.4 billion is spit compared to the trillions of dollars we're overspending, right? $2 trillion a year. And this is a Doge cut. And I told you guys, we needed to pass this particular rescission bill just to prove we could cut something, anything, right? And why the pushback? Because this is the Democrats' last stand. You can't have socialism, which turns to communism, if you don't get everybody on the public dole. So you can't cut anything. So Chuck Schumer says as lawmakers begin crafting the 12 annual appropriations bills, yeah, they ain't crafting crap, they haven't for 25 years, to fund the federal government in fiscal year 2026, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer has implied that his party will refuse to cooperate in the appropriations process if Republicans revoke billions in funding from previous years. The Senate has set to vote on a rescission package that narrowly passed the House in June and would cancel already appropriated federal funds for public broadcasting and some foreign aid programs. Republicans only need a majority vote in the legislation to pass the upper chamber, but Schumer warned GOP lawmakers on a Tuesday letter that passing the rescission package will have grave implications, such as Democrats blocking any government funding deal and risking a government shutdown. Please, bring it on. Bring it on, okay? In August, Chucky, you want to shut down the government. We, the people, are right there with you, right? Because now we've got the big, beautiful bill passed, and that just continues if you don't pass a budget. And oh, yeah, Trump's in charge of who gets laid off, who doesn't get paid during a shutdown, and who does get paid. So I'm pretty sure you'll get your Social Security checks. Either the Democrats will say, a shutdown will cripple us. No, it'll cripple you because it'll stop you from stealing. It's absurd for Republicans to expect Democrats to act as business as usual and engage in a bipartisan appropriations process to fund the government while they concurrently plot to pass a purely partisan rescission bill to defund those same programs negotiated on a bipartisan basis behind the scenes. Okay? They're threatening to shut down the government over this rescission bill. Does that motivate you to call your senator and say, pass it this week, pass it, and let Trump sign it and start cutting something and then bring the next rescission bill? Yeah, you can't vote for these clowns again in 2026 unless they get with the program. They're not with the program. They're not with us. They're with the Dems. You got to be heard, and you got to be heard this week. All right. I hope you've enjoyed the first half of the podcast. Lots of good stuff. I hope you got some information, from the Epstein fiasco that we're going through. Pray for Pam Bondi, for President Trump, for Bongino and Patel. We need them to find a way forward to do our work, our business, and to give transparency like EPA leader Zeldin said we're going to get on cloud seeding, right? And then call your senators. We'll be back in a few minutes after these messages. You've been listening to the We the People Convention News and Opinion podcast, and my name is Tom Zawistowski. The We the People Convention News and Opinion radio program is paid for by donors like you. You can donate to the We the People Convention and support our cause by going to wethepeopleconvention.org or by sending your check in any amount to We the People Convention, P.O. Box 6211, Akron, Ohio 44312. When you're playing a video, including our podcast, you'll see this little cloud button. And if you click it, it'll actually download the video to your hard disk. And this works on our podcast page as well. If you're playing our podcast, and it's going to be loud, so I won't play it for much, but there's our podcast playing, and you can see this little, download button, okay? The other thing you got to notice on our podcast page is that there's a link here where you can send me a message about this podcast. Hey, it was great. Hey, I didn't like it. What, something was wrong, or here's a correction, that kind of thing. You can use that link. And then these are the stories that I covered in this particular podcast. And you'll see there's links that go to the stories, to the articles that I used in reporting on that. So you can click on that. You'll also see that you can sign up for our emails and text messages, but you can also watch our podcast on Roku TV and on Amazon Fire TV. And these are the instructions for doing that. So this is all on our podcast page, right on the front page where the yellow button was. So if you click there, this is our podcast page. These are the instructions for watching on Roku TV or Amazon Fire. And I watch our podcast on TV. It just feels more comfortable. So you can do that. We're also on Rumble. If you go to Rumble, you should join Rumble. And, it's Tom Z at WTPC. You'll see our podcast there. So you can get us a lot of different ways, including on Apple iTunes. And then this is an audio version of our podcast. If you click here, it'll just play the audio of the podcast. It will not, show you the video. So people can, listen to that while they're jogging or, working out, working in the yard, or just relaxing and just want to listen to the audio and not watch the video. And again, this is available on phone, on your iPad, on your laptop, on your computer, any way you want. And you can share, whatever you see. If you're on a page that you really like, and you see an article that you think, geez, I've got to share this article, with someone in my family. You can send them an email by clicking on the little envelope. You can post it on Parler or MeWe. If you click on this, you get all kinds of options, where you can put it on Twitter or Facebook, whatever, which we don't support, but you can do whatever you want. So we ask that you share what you see on our We the People convention site, and that you get more people to look at it, because that's the whole idea here, to help educate people, inform them. And then, as I said before, Link, we're not just about talk, we're about action. And in my podcast every week, which is published every Saturday, so if the new podcast usually comes out every Saturday, and in that podcast, I will ask you to do certain things that will help protect and defend your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. So that's the We the People Convention website. Come back often, use it to be informed, and share it with others. Thanks a lot. All right. And we're back for the second half of the podcast. Appreciate you being with us and staying with us. And again, I have to redo that video, and I almost got to it this week, I swear. But, we've got some things that aren't in that video. First of all, we are on Twitter at TomZWTPC, on x.com, TomZWTPC. We are back on Facebook, and we are posting videos, and we are posting things at We the People Convention. Okay, so you can do that on Facebook. I know many of you on Facebook. We are on TikTok. And we are on YouTube again. We've been thrown off of YouTube, but now we're back on, and we're getting thousands of views. And so many of you watching this are watching on YouTube. So you can go to We the People Convention on YouTube, and that's where we're at. Also, on our website, we have this thing called the Chapters Player, and it takes from Saturday until Sunday for them to process it. But we put a second player on our podcast page that has every story that we do in this podcast with a link to it, so that as you can just read down the stories and go, well, what's this about? And click, and it'll take you right to that part of the podcast. And you can copy that link and send it via email or text or post on social media to share it with others. So we're trying to give you the tools to inform your fellow citizens, because that's what it's about, right? I mean, the more people we get to watch this podcast who understand they need to call their senator this week, right? That's the more people call their senators, the more likely we're going to get Trump's appointees, passed. And so, when I say we're about action, that's why you're watching this. We're not spectators. You're not watching this podcast to be entertained. I'm not here to entertain you. I'm here to inform you and hopefully give you some direction and some understanding of how these things all fit together, like the Epstein thing and, then Lindsey Graham and Ukraine, okay? And so we need people to watch this podcast. It's up to you to share it, okay? And then, we'll make our country better. We'll all have more individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. That's why we're here. That's why we're doing it. And I'm really glad you're here. I'm really glad you chose to spend your time to watch this podcast. We take that very seriously, and we work hard to make it the best podcast we possibly can. And we think it's pretty doggone good. So thanks for joining us. So now let's move into some other important stories, okay, that happened this week. Trump to ban all Chinese land purchases. Now, this is something you and I have been talking about forever. It just made no bloody sense that the Chinese government was buying farms. Well, they just happen to be right next to our Air Force bases. And we let them. We let them. It was insane. And if you go to wethepeopleconvention.org, on the front page, there's a link there, there's a block there that says Dems and China. And you click on that and it shows all the politicians, not just Dems, who've been bribed by China to allow them to attack our country from within. This is just great news that we're going to finally take this land away from them and any foreign agency. Okay, AG Secretary Brooke Rollins says there will be no amnesty for farmers from the illegal farmers and no buying of U.S. land. In remarks on Tuesday, U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins addressed rumors there would be mass amnesty for illegal aliens in the United States. That is not happening. There's a video on this article that you can watch. That's not all. Rollins also announced a plan to ban the Chinese Communist Party from purchasing any farmland in the United States. This also applies to other foreign adversaries because Iran is buying land, Russia is buying land. Today, we're taking our American farmland back. American agriculture is not about feeding our families, but about protecting our nation and standing up to foreign adversaries who are buying our farmland, stealing our research, and creating dangerous vulnerabilities in the very systems that sustain us, she stated, alongside Department of Homeland Secretary Kristi Noem and Attorney General Pam Bondi. The USDA's National Farm Security Action Plan would ban Chinese nationals from buying American farmland and to claw back what has already been purchased and from China and other adversaries. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth declared that the Pentagon is getting serious about the threats posed by Chinese ownership of farmland near U.S. military bases and installations, with the Defense Department declaring that food security is national security. You think having Chinese, ownership where they can put spy devices to track every plane that lands on our Air Force bases, every truck that comes in and out, you think that might be a problem? I know it sounds nuts to you guys, because could you imagine Eisenhower or someone allowing this? How did this happen? But this is how bad our country is. This is how deep the hole is that Trump's got to dig us out of and fill up. Wow. So thank you for taking action. I said earlier that, Trump has said he's going to send weapons to Ukraine now, Patriot missiles. And then he said this: Trump opens the door to Senate sanctions bill as frustrations with Moscow grows. This is a change of directions. Previously skeptical of being belligerent towards Russia, Trump has hinted he's now considering a tough sanctions bill against Moscow. President Trump has increasingly aired his frustrations with his Russian counterpart over stalled peace negotiations and continued attacks on Ukraine, building momentum in the Senate to move forward with a tough sanctions bill against the Russian Federation. Until this week, Senate Majority Leader John Thune has remained quiet about the fate of the bipartisan sanction bill proposed by Senator Lindsey Graham and co-sponsored by 84 Senate colleagues. The bill would be the toughest package against Russia yet since the beginning of the war. Thune said on Tuesday he would like to see Graham's bill become law, saying it would send a very strong message to Putin. We want to make sure when we move it that we're coordinating with the White House. He said it's a very bipartisan issue here in the Senate. I'm hoping we'll get the other entities in place where there's an opportunity to get this done. Trump said this week, we are getting a lot of bull thrown at us by Putin. He said bluntly on Tuesday at a televised cabinet meeting, he's very nice all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless. The president's statements have marked a shift from his earlier in his second administration when he often refused to criticize Putin or Russia's attacks. Okay? And he said there's going to be a statement this coming Monday, July 14th, about Russia. Folks, I think we're going to go big time against Putin. And I'll tell you what, Trump, we all don't want war. We want to end this war. Trump tried to end this war. Putin is the one who's now not playing with us, right? He thinks it can work, Trump. Yeah, good luck with that. So I'm all for these sanctions. I'm for frickin' NATO countries to stop buying oil from Russia, right? Here's the dirty little secret is, folks, this whole Ukraine war, while they claim they're fighting Russia, Europe has been funding Russia. It's got to end. And now it's going to end because Trump's going to end it. And he's going to end it by crippling Russia's economy. Do you know that Russia's economy is only the size of Italy's? And most of their money comes from oil sales. But oil is down because the Saudis are working with Trump to keep things going, to make there be enough oil to lower the cost per barrel. It's time to stop playing this game with Putin. Okay? We're not fools. Trump's no fool. Putin's about to find out. And I am with him on this. I was not for the Ukraine war. It should have never been started. I don't think Putin started it. I think the deep state started it. But now Trump's got to end it. And if this is what we got to do to end it, I'm all for it. This was another, again, I keep telling you, we avoided the destruction of our nation by this much, by a tiny margin. The commies had nearly destroyed us. And one of the big ways they did it, besides trans stuff and DEI and all that stuff, we'll talk about some of that again later, it was climate warfare. It was attacking our ability to generate cheap, abundant energy, which is the key to capitalism. So the Department of Energy comes out with a report this week, warns of blackouts, major blackouts due to misguided renewable energy investments over the last 12 years, starting with Obama. It was the commie plan to destroy the West, and Europe fell for it, hook, line, and sinker, or maybe they didn't fall for it. They got bribed into doing it, and many here did. But you and I, the patriots, we knew this was garbage. We knew there was no sense to what they were saying. We knew that climate change was not a threat. The oceans weren't going to rise. John Kerry's a lying commie fool. Okay? You and I, stopped this. But now we're in serious trouble. U.S. Department of Energy released a report on Monday warning that power outages would increase 100-fold by 2030 due to increased energy demands and insufficient additions of firm generating capacity. The report on strengthening U.S. grid reliability and security fulfills a directive from President Trump's April 2025 executive order and outlines a uniform methodology for identifying at-risk regions and guiding emergency federal intervention. The report warns that plant requirements, delays in approving infrastructure investments, and rapid demand growth from AI and manufacturing are putting the nation's grid at risk of widespread reliability issues. This report affirms what we already know. The United States cannot afford to continue down the unstable and dangerous path of energy subtraction previous leaders pursued, Energy Secretary Chris Wright stated in a statement provided to Breitbart News. If we are going to keep the lights on, win the AI race, and keep electric prices from skyrocketing, the United States must unleash American energy. Okay? We're in trouble. They crippled us intentionally. Now we are moving aggressively. And it's not a moment too soon. You got to pray that we can keep the lights on. Because remember, it's not just AI data centers, which are going to cause us to have to double our capacity by 2030. Trump's getting all these companies to bring car manufacturing plants and chip makers and pharmaceutical plants and all kinds of tire makers and things back here. That's great for us. That's jobs. That's building the middle class. And I'm going to tell you some great news about that at the end of the podcast. But holy moly, if we don't have the energy, we're done. China crushes us. We can't let that happen. So I'm glad to see this, but you need to share that story because people don't get it. Oh, it's always, America's always great. I'll never be affected. Oh, no. Yeah, we're this close. We're this close to the edge. We got to get away from the edge. So this was really an interesting story. Don't know if you heard this. Pentagon to become largest shareholder in rare earth miner MP Materials. The shares of that stock surged 50%. Yeah, why wouldn't they? This is really interesting. The Defense Department will become the largest shareholder in rare earth miner MP Materials after agreeing to buy $400 million of its preferred stock, the company said Thursday. MP Materials owns the only operational rare earth mine in the U.S. at Mountain Pass, California, about 60 miles outside of Las Vegas. Proceeds from the Pentagon investment will be used to expand MP's rare earth processing capacity and magnet production, the company said. Shares of MP Materials jumped more than 50% on the news. Rare earth materials are used in magnets that are key components in a range of military weapon systems, including F-35 warplanes, drones, and submarines, according to the Defense Department. The U.S. was almost entirely dependent on foreign countries for rare earths in 2023, with China representing about 70% of imports, according to U.S. Geological Survey. Rare earths have been a central point of contention in recent trade discussions with China. Now, I'm kind of surprised that the Pentagon would have to do this. And I guess there's historical precedent during World War II and stuff where the military took ownership of some defense contractors. I don't know. But you would have thought they could have got investors to put the money in instead of the Pentagon. So I'm not sure I understand this. So any of you who are better about this in our listening audience, send me an email at info@wethepeopleconvention.com and let me know why you think this had to happen this way, but I'm glad to see it. And again, folks, we have rare earths everywhere. I was at an event on Thursday night and happened to meet the guy who's the head of the Ohio Mining Association, and he was just giddy. He's like, this is going to be the greatest age for mining ever, and Ohio has vast reserves of all the stuff that we couldn't mine. And now we can. And not only can we damn well better. Again, the eco-terrorists were funded by the communist Chinese to destroy capitalism. And they almost did because we listened to politicians and think tanks, all of them, and again, I always bring the receipts, who were funded by the communist Chinese to sell us this garbage. Now we've come to our senses, and we're going to make America great again by using our God-given natural resources so that we can defend ourselves and not rely on our enemies for critical materials. Great news, great stories. This is a good story. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy drops all DEI environmental justice requirements from grants. This is what I've talked about over and over. What the Obama commies did, and the Clintons and the Biden people, they basically used government to destroy our country. They took our government and put every contract, said, oh, you can't have this government contract unless you hire trans people and queer people and so many blacks and so many Hispanics and so many women. No meritocracy at all. And we said, to restore America, Trump has to remove this, rip it out. Here you go. The Trump administration will not enforce any Biden-era diversity, equity, or inclusion or Green New Scam requirements on Department of Transportation grant recipients, Secretary Sean Duffy announced Wednesday. After blasting the previous administration last month for leaving a massive backlog of DEI-filled grant projects for his agency to take care of, Duffy said this week, it's a new day in America where common sense is in the driver's seat. All roads, rails, skies, and water will be safer for it. The public wants to see their hard-earned dollars going towards safety and efficiency standards, not towards woke DEI or American energy-killing ideas, the secretary continued in his statement, citing several President Donald Trump's executive orders in a letter to all recipients of DOT funding, which is tons of people. Duffy said those actions direct federal agencies to identify and eliminate any policies or funding agreements related in any way to climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, racial equality, gender identity, diversity, equity, inclusion goals, environmental justice, and the former President Joe Biden's Justice 40 initiative. This is serious, folks. This is what you got to have. And our tax dollars are going to go way further. We're going to get more road miles, more bridges, more airport stuff because we're not wasting it on the communist assault on our society. And then Trump made a surprise appointment this week where he's making Duffy the temporary head of NASA. Now, NASA's a real hurting agency. And I just heard this morning that there's plans to cut like 3,000 jobs throughout NASA. Because what are they doing? What have they done for 30 years besides have cushy government jobs with unbelievable benefits when they're not launching hardly anything? They got no vision. Elon Musk is NASA. So why are we spending this money? Trump's saying we're not. We're cutting that. We're going to cut jobs. And they're going to cry, oh, you can't do that. You'll hurt America. Yeah, you're the ones that have been hurting America. And then Trump got a huge ruling this week that supports what Duffy's going to do at NASA. Supreme Court greenlights Trump order for mass firings across the federal government. The justices granted the administration's emergency appeal seeking permission to enforce a February 11 executive order that instructed agencies to carry out dramatic reductions in force. The Trump administration can move forward with plans to fire tens of thousands of workers across the federal government, the Supreme Court ruled on Tuesday. Yes. The judge in California had blocked the layoffs, finding that they would likely violate federal law, but the justices granted an emergency appeal from the administration seeking permission to enforce the executive order that instructed agencies to carry out dramatic reductions in force. In an apparent 8-1 ruling, the High Court said it was not assessing the legality of any particular agency's layoff plans, nor any moves taken so far. The litigation over downsizing efforts is sure to continue, but for now, the justices said the administration can enforce the executive order and a memo from the Office of Budget and Management implementing that EO. Okay? It's the president's prerogative. They don't have any right to decide whether the president thinks we have too many people in the IRS. That's lawfare. So they'll keep playing their little lawfare games, but what you're seeing is, as they go up to the appeals court level or they go to the Supreme Court, you're getting smacked down because it's bullcrap. They got not a leg to stand on. Trump has every right to do it. Because you notice that Joe Biden and Barack Obama had every right to add all these people, right? How come that was okay? But when you want to cut them, it's illegal? Yeah, we're not that stupid, but you're stupid because we're not going to put up with this. So speaking of being fired, this should have been way earlier, and I don't know if I think this is good or not. Multiple Secret Service agents suspended in connection with Trump assassination attempt. Now, we are at the 1-year anniversary tomorrow of the assassination attempt on President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. And it came out this week, 6 Secret Service agents have been suspended for their conduct in connection with the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania. During Fox News' Jesse Watters prime time on Wednesday, the host announced that 6 Secret Service agents who were connected to then President Trump's Butler assassination attempt have been suspended. Watters pointed out that the news comes just days shy of the first anniversary, where firefighter Corey Compertor was dead and others were wounded. The discipline against the 6 agents was issued in recent months, and the agents were given the right to appeal. The suspensions ranged from 10 to 42 days. How that is an appropriate disciplinary action for people whose actions literally almost killed a presidential candidate and a former president, I don't know if you feel this way, but no, they should have been fired and they should have been charged. They should be charged for dereliction of duty. The one woman who was suspended was in charge of being there to set up, to look at the grounds and decide on how to protect the president. Suspension is not enough. Ladies and gentlemen, we are a year out. We still don't know anything about the shooter. Why don't we know who ordered the shooter's house to be swept clean? Why don't we know who did that? Why don't we know, who didn't look at the roof? Who didn't follow up the investigation? Who cleared the cremation of the shooter like within 24 hours after the shooting? This is why the Epstein thing, to tie the beginning of the podcast to this, is so important. Because this wasn't an accident. This was an attempt by someone to kill Donald Trump. We want to know who that is, and we want them to go to prison at least, if not be hung by the neck until dead for treason. This is serious. We aren't just going to say, oh, Trump won anyway. He survived and now he's president. Don't worry about that. Forget about that. We ain't forgetting about anything. Sure as hell ain't forgetting about Russia, and the 2020 election. And now we're saying that, they're going to, go after Brennan and Comey and all that stuff. And John Solomon from Just the News had a story on X where he's saying he's being told that they're going to use conspiracy charges that do not have a 5-year limit on prosecutions to go after Comey and Brennan and Strzok and Page and all the rest of them. I sure hope so. But is Pan Bondi the one that's going to do that? I don't know. But the bottom line is suspensions are not nearly enough. And I just think that's outrageous. And hopefully more is going to happen. And hopefully someday we're going to know the truth about this, because we sure aren't finding out the truth about much else. This is another good thing that the Trump administration is doing. DHS formally subpoenas Harvard over alleged criminality and misconduct with foreign students. This is a big deal. In this episode of No Longer Hallowed Halls of Academia, we had to do the things the hard way. Those are the words of the Department of Homeland Security Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin as she announced that the department was sending a formal administrative subpoena to Harvard University over its alleged abuse of the Student and Exchange Visitors Program in conjunction with anti-Semitic protests that raged on campus amid Israel and the Palestinian conflict, which eventually led to an apology from the Harvard president, Alan Garber. Apology or not, words are cheap without demonstrative actions related to the issue at hand. McLaughlin told Fox News Digital, we tried to do things the easy way with Harvard. Now, through their refusal to cooperate, we have to do things the hard way. Harvard, like other universities, has allowed foreign students to abuse their visa privileges and advocate for violence and terrorism on campus. If Harvard won't defend the interests of its students, then we will. Okay? That's good. There's real, it says, the refusal to comply with an administrative subpoena can result in serious consequences, including contempt of court, civil penalties, criminal penalties, obstruction of justice, injunction, freezing of assets, and yet Harvard persists in largely blowing off the administration. And the Trump people are saying, no, not this time. You can hire all the Jeffrey Epstein lawyers you want and Diddy lawyers you want. We're coming for you. That's awesome. Speaking of transgendered lawyers and things like that, Trump subpoenas transgender clinics and doctors for transitioning children. Remember, Trump said, it's over. You can't do this. The Justice Department has issued nearly 20 subpoenas to doctors and clinics involved in performing transgender medical procedures on children, DOJ officials announced on Wednesday. The Justice Department, Chad Mizell, made the announcement during the Federal Trade Commission's workshop on the dangers of gender-affirming care for minors in Washington, D.C. Mizell shared that DOJ has issued nearly 20 subpoenas against clinics who are engaged in transgender transition attempts, noting that DOJ's investigations include healthcare fraud, false statements, and more. Mizell argues urged Americans, this is for you, to come forward if they could provide information about deceptive practices in the transgender medicine industry, saying Wednesday, if you are someone who has been harmed, please come forward and let us know. If you are someone who knows someone, if your kids at school hear that Janie is being, going to have surgery for this and where that's at, report it to the Department of Justice. We got to turn these people in. Trump said it is illegal for you to mutilate children because of your warped mental illness or your warped ideology. Now, he's not just talking. They're filing subpoenas. They're going to charge these people. Yes, that's what we voted for. But you have to play your role. If you know something, you got to say something, okay? That's our deal. We're not spectators. We're participants. This is another awesome move. Trump will no longer fund illegal alien education. how nuts was it that our do-gooders in our states, even in red states, said, oh, we're going to give illegals in-state tuition. Not only are you not a citizen of the state, you're not even a citizen of the country. Why would we do that? Oh, because we hate America and we want to destroy your child's education, right? And we want to use your tuition dollars to subsidize the importation of people who want to destroy your child's life, okay? Trump says, no, we're not doing that anymore. Taxpayers will no longer pay for the education of non-citizens in the U.S. illegally, the U.S. Department of Education said Thursday. It said it will end taxpayer subsidization of illegal aliens in career, technical, and adult education programs. A news release said that this change takes place due to an interpretive rule issue Thursday in which the department rescinded a Dear Colleagues letter from the Clinton administration that enabled non-qualified illegal aliens to access federal public benefits in contravention of the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act. Okay? That act generally limits eligibility for federal public benefits to U.S. citizens, permanent residents, and certain categories of qualified aliens, the release said. Federal public benefits include any retirement, welfare, health, disability, public or assisted housing, post-secondary education, food assistance, etc. Now get this. This is the kicker. This goes back to 1997. Here's the kicker. In 1997, the Clinton administration issued a Dear Colleagues letter that erroneously exempted career, technical, and adult education programs from being subject to that law that says you can't get this money unless you're a citizen. In doing so, the department's interpretation mischaracterized the law by creating artificial distinctions between federal benefit programs based upon the method of assistance. Congress made no distinction in the law. And therefore, the Trump administration has reversed it. It took from 1997, folks, 36 years. They lied about a law to steal your money to give to illegals who undermine your jobs and your income from your pay. The government did this. Clinton did this. And no Republican stopped it, did they? No Republicans stopped this. They loved it because they wanted, for their corporate donors, the Republican corporate donors, they wanted slave labor. This is how they got it. This is no different than when Obama said, oh, Title IX includes gender. So you got to let boys play in girl sports. When Title IX says nothing about gender. It says sex, not gender. It was a lie. But they used the government and the Dear Colleague letter. Obama sent a letter to every university saying, okay, you got to do this. It was a lie. This is how our government was used, weaponized against us. This is how Trump is taking their weapons away and clearing the way for America to be great again. This is no small deal. You should share this from our podcast page. When we list all the stories to the link, you should share that with everyone. That's a big deal. And so speaking of big deals, I mentioned it earlier, Trump's America First economy just struck gold. What do you mean? I talked to you about the jobs report last week. Good job report, right? Well, Americans were drowning for 4 long, miserable years. The Biden regime lied through its teeth about the economy. Well, Americans were drowning in inflation, crushed by stagnant wages, and watching their savings vanish just to keep the lights on, not to mention overregulation of business, illegals being brought in to steal your jobs. Biden's handlers were out there cheering and whooping it up. They told us the economy was booming. They told us if we weren't happy, we just didn't understand the economy. You were just too stupid, said the people on CNN and ABC and NBC and Washington Post. You're just too stupid to know that you don't have enough in your bank account to pay the bills. Yeah, they found out last November who was stupid. It was some of the most shameful gaslighting the country's ever seen. People couldn't pay their rent. Chicken wings and eggs became a luxury. Families were forced to pick between gas and groceries, while the White House insisted everything was dandy. But now, finally, there's some real light at the end of the tunnel, and no surprise, it's coming from the return of actual leadership. Under President Trump, the U.S. economy is waking up and starting to soar. And here's the best part. While we send illegals packing, Americans are finally stepping up and filling those jobs. The country's economy is turning around, and this time it's benefiting millions of people who were left behind and lied to under Biden. The Labor Department jobs report for the month of June shows that the number of foreign-born workers declined by 348,000 from May, while the number of foreign-born workers has declined by more than 543,000 jobs since January. By contrast, so illegals are down 500,000 jobs. By contrast, the number of U.S.-born workers increased by 830,000 from May to June, and it's over 2 million higher than when the second Trump term began. 2 million American workers have new jobs since Trump took over in January. Let me say that again. 2 million Americans now have jobs. This comes as a more significant shift in the composition of the workforce when compared with last year during the Biden administration, when foreign-born workers gained 1.2 million jobs and native-born workers picked up 1 million jobs over the same time period. So listen to this short video clip from a spokesman about what you're seeing. When President Trump, I got people telling me still, oh, the big, beautiful bill gave tax cuts to the wealthy again. You know, they're still making so much money. And yeah, no tax on tips and no tax on overtime. That's really not helping, you know, the middle class or the blue collar worker. Horse hockey. You're going to want to share this little video clip, which I'll put on our podcast page at WeThePeopleConvention.com. This is something that should be music to your ears if you lived through the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s when they shipped all our jobs overseas and ruined us. Listen to this.
Inflation below double digits. That was their way to control prices, but getting out of control. But if you look at it now, blue collar wages are up 1.7% in the first 5 months of President Trump's term. They were down 1.7% in Biden's entire term. So what you're seeing is we're hiring American workers because there's no other option, and we're paying them more. And this can continue because companies have enough profit margin to keep raising wages for this segment of the population. Meanwhile, we're seeing in the white collar market, we're seeing Microsoft cut more jobs because of the deflation I talked about. So this economy is rebalancing in a very pro-American way, and I think it's a great trend that's going to continue. There's another 6 million workers in the U.S. that are out of work, not looking for a job. You start giving nice salary increases, they'll probably come back into the labor force.
Yeah, how about that? Play that for the people who want to tell you, oh, the Republicans are just for the rich and they're run by oligarchs and all that. Yeah, oligarchs aren't taking those jobs. Regular Americans are taking those jobs. And it's because Trump is creating jobs, but he's also creating an environment where the businesses are more profitable so they can pay the money that Americans will work for. And I want to spell a few lies too. This lie about, oh, you know, the Democrats, we need to import these illegals so they can clean our toilets and pick our food. How racist is that? You want slave labor because you're too freaking spoiled to get off your fat ass to clean your own toilet. You sick people, you elitists. But here's a little thing. You know how many, I just learned this week. You know how many illegals work in farms, on farms in the United States? You know what percentage, not how many, what percentage of farm workers are illegals in the United States? What do you think? Take a guess. How about 23%? The rest are Americans. And guess what? The 23%, they all work for big ag, baby. They work on those big industrial farms. You know that? American family farms employ 100% Americans to work. Americans will work if you just pay them. And guess what? You can't pay them if the government is taxing you and putting DEI on you and saying you got to hire people that can't do the job, right? Don't blame business owners. Oh, they're just greedy. They're just pocketing all the money. They didn't have the money because the government was taking it. And when they do have money, you know what they're going to do? They're going to hire good workers. And they're going to reward the ones who do the best work because now they can, because government's not penalizing them. So now Trump is bringing all these companies here through the, through their the tariffs, And what do we get here? We get this great story, okay, for Trump. Trump tariffs deliver U.S. post $2.7 billion budget surplus. Budget surplus. Listen to this. The U.S. Treasury reported a budget surplus in June, driven in large part by a surge in tariff revenue, thanks to President Donald Trump's America First trade policies. The surplus clears a clear reminder that strategic tariffs can strengthen the nation's bottom line while prioritizing domestic industries and American jobs. In June, the U.S. Treasury reported a budget surplus of just over $27 billion, a sharp turnaround from the $316 billion deficit recorded in May. The jump in revenue was partially fueled by a rise in tariff collections, helping to drive a 13% increase in overall government receipts compared to the same month last year. Meanwhile, not only did he bring in this tariff money, government spending in June fell 7%. So far this fiscal year, which ends on September 30th, the deficit stands at $1.34 trillion, about 5% higher than the same point last year. However, when accounting for calendar adjustments, whatever the hell that means, the deficit has actually dipped by about 1%. Year to date, federal revenues are up 7%, while spending has increased by 6%. As a result, rising revenue for tariffs is helping to strengthen the government's financial position. So can we ever have a balanced budget? If we keep firing employees, if we keep cutting programs, if we use rescission and you call your senators and get them to pass not just this first rescission bill, but all the rest that should come, yes, we can get to the point where we are not deficit spending. And then if you're making more than you're spending, you can start paying down the debt. Yes, that's a long-term project, but I wanted to share that story with you to prove it can happen. To prove it can happen. And I want to just take a minute. Steve Moore had a little opinion piece, the biggest conservative victory in 30 years. He just had this list of items that he saw hidden gems in the big, beautiful bill that he just wanted to highlight. Let me just list them real quick. The law is the most aggressive federal advancement of school choice by allowing low-income parents to direct education dollars to private charter or Catholic schools that are better for their kids. That's huge. The law also expands eligibility for personalized medical savings account instead of conventional insurance. This allows workers to control their health care dollars. The law increases mining and drilling on foreign lands, on federal lands, to increase access to America's natural resources. The law formally ends the absurd Biden student loan forgiveness programs, which force taxpayers to swallow the cost of unpaid college loans. The law repeals the electric vehicle mandate and phases out the Green New Deal. The law expands opportunity zones and extends tax benefits for investing in inner cities and economically depressed rural areas. Okay? That's something you don't know about that is a big deal to get jobs where there's people. The law increases the tax, get this, to 8% on the nearly $1 trillion of bloated university endowments, money that was never taxed. An 8% tax on university endowments. The law strengthens worth requirements for Medicare and food stamp recipients, which shows that historically they will take jobs now if you say you got to do it to qualify, and then they take a job. They will pay taxes, we will bring in more revenue like happened in Trump's first term to make our balanced budget. And finally, the new law authorizes the sale of expanded spectrum to strengthen rural broadband to secure America's technological dominance and reduce the national debt by nearly $100 billion. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good things. We're headed in the right direction thanks to President Trump's leadership and thanks to the work you did to make this happen. You and I, we the people, we sacrificed everything. Our money, our time, our effort, blood, sweat, and tears to save this nation. Now we're on the path to saving it, but as I point out on this podcast, there's lots to be worried about. Energy problems, rare earth minerals, attacked by the Chinese on our country, the war in Ukraine. Trump's got his hands full, but we're fighting and we're winning, and you got to be excited about that. And a couple more things I want you to be excited about, and we'll wrap up the podcast. I think most of you guys will remember this. There was a guy named Douglas Murray who put out a meme that basically was a joke, telling Hillary Clinton voters in 2016 you could vote by texting to a certain text message number. It was a joke. Yeah, they want to show that those kind of jokes aren't allowed. And they persecuted and prosecuted Douglas Mackey. And this week, the appeals court threw his case out. He said, I would like to thank God, thank my family, thank my beautiful wife, attorney Andrew Frisch, the incredible attorneys at Jones Day, and you, the friends who prayed and donated and spread the word since day one. Breaking, the Second District Court of Appeals has thrown out my conviction for lack of evidence. The case has been remanded to the district court with orders to immediately dismiss it. Now, let me tell you the backstory of this. And again, I do a lot of these stories at the end of the podcast. Last week, I did the story about the 60-year-old woman that, spoke out about a trans guy in their YMCA shower. Okay. She wants some money for that. Okay. Because I tell you, we must be willing to fight and pay the price. This guy, this has been going on for like 7 years. And what's sad about this is the guy that charged him was a Trump appointee. After Trump had appointed this guy who went after Mackey for this meme after Trump left office. And then they continued to prosecute him. Folks, there was never a case. The case they tried to charge him under federal law 18 U.S.C. 241, the government claimed that a couple of memes he posted with the 2016 election, jokes suggesting Hillary Clinton supporters could vote by text, were part of a criminal conspiracy to interfere with the election. Now, under this law, you had to prove that Mackey had other people involved and they were executing a plan to mislead people on how to get them not to vote. There was not a shred of evidence. But it took from 2021, in 2023, he was convicted. So they were charged him in like 22. All these years for the court to go, there's no case here. Just like all the Trump lawfare cases, just like the January 6th cases. Okay? And now he's free. And you know what he said? He's going to sue for damages. Yes. Just like the January 6ers, sue for damages. But that was justice. Justice denied, but you should celebrate that. That's a great story. And the link will be on our podcast page. And I'm going to close with this one, and this is a direct ask. This is a big deal. IRS says churches can now legally endorse political candidates. Churches and other houses of worship registered as tax-exempt nonprofits can endorse political candidates to their congregation, the IRS said on Monday. Let's see. The decision, first reported by the New York Times, was communicated in court filings intended to settle a lawsuit filed by 2 Texas churches and a group of Christian broadcasters. 501c3 nonprofit organizations have long been prohibited from endorsing candidates or otherwise intervening in campaigns for political offices as a condition of their tax-exempt status. That was another lie. That was not true. But pastors and politicians used it as an excuse to keep the religious right out of politics. In its court ruling, the IRS said endorsing candidates neither constituted taking part or intervening in a political campaign as the agency's code currently describes. Bona fide communications internal to a house of worship between the house of worship and its congregation in connection with religious services do neither of those things any more than does a family discussing concerning candidates, the agency wrote. How about that? So the pastor's saying, hey, we got to vote for these school board candidates because they're bringing DEI and trans into our schools. That's just communication with your family, your church family. The IRS also, it noted, not generally enforce prohibitions on endorsing candidates referred to as the Johnson Amendment in the context of worshiping services. A 2022 investigation by ProPublica and the Texas Tribune found that at least 18 churches had endorsed political candidates, and the agency largely looked the other way because they didn't have a leg to stand on legally. This was another lie, and your pastor hid behind this his whole life. Oh, we can't tell you who to vote for. We can't talk about this. The IRS just said, yes, you can. Your job is to send this article to your pastor this week on Sunday. Print it out. Print out that story at WeThePeopleConvention.org and hand it to them and say, now, when are you going to start preaching the Bible and speaking biblically about how we should vote? Because it's now legal. It always was. You just were lied to. The plaintiffs that sued the IRS had previously asked for an even broader exemption, allowing all nonprofits to endorse candidates to their members. In its court filing, the IRS said prohibiting churches from endorsing candidates would create serious tensions with the First Amendment. Yeah, like we have the right. As Christians, you have the right to speak your First Amendment right, to say who you want to vote for. For many houses of worship, the exercise of religious beliefs includes teaching or instructing their congregation regarding all aspects of life, including guidance concerning the impact of faith on the choices inherent in election politics, it wrote. Think about this. How long have we waited for this? How long have they lied to us? Are you going to do that? Every one of you listening who goes to church needs to print this story out at WeThePeopleConvention.org and pass it out to the people in the pews. Take the link on our podcast page and share it with everyone you know. Because it's over. The lie is done. It is past time for churches to preach the Bible and talk about the effects of what these candidates will do to your children, to your community, to your church, for goodness sake. Wow. Think that's a big deal? Think that's a good thing to celebrate at the end of this podcast? I sure hope so. So I hope you will tell people about this podcast. I hope if you disagree with me or you have a story I didn't cover that I should share with everyone, if you have a comment, write to me at info@WeThePeopleConvention.org, info@WeThePeopleConvention.org, and I will read your emails and I will share your stories if they fit our criteria of helping us protect and defend our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. And don't forget, on the podcast page, at the bottom of the link of all the stories, there's a section that says this week's action items. Call your senator and tell them to get to work. Share this story with your pastors and other things I've mentioned in this podcast, right? We don't just talk, we act to defend our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. And I thank you for being here with us to get this information, and I thank you for sharing it. God willing, we'll both be back together again next week. I hope you stay in good health. If you're not, I hope you get better. I hope you have a great week. You've been listening to the We the People Convention News and Opinion Podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski. May God bless you because he's already blessed America. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.
Can you see Yes, we are the brave. We'll fight to rename the name of the brave. We are the US of A.